You're joking. You're actually firing me?
Pack your things, Mr. Calloway. You have 10 minutes.
I have a daughter in the hospital.
Not our problem.
Reese Calloway stood motionless in the glass-walled corner office of Apex Stratagem's downtown high-rise. Rain traced crooked paths down the window behind Martin Voss, the regional director, who had just handed him a severance envelope like it was a napkin at a fast food counter. Voss didn't look up from his phone. Reese didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. He simply reached into his worn jacket pocket, pulled out a sleek obsidian phone no one in the building had ever seen before, and dialed a single digit. "Mr. Kincaid, fire every one of them." He ended the call before the person on the other end could respond. Voss finally glanced up, smirking. "Who was that supposed to be? Your lawyer? Good luck." Reese didn't answer. He walked out of the office, past the cubicle farm where 27 employees pretended not to watch, and stepped into the elevator without looking back. The doors closed on their bewildered faces. If you're loving this story, smash that like button and subscribe so you never miss another moment of karma in motion. Drop a comment below. What would you do if you had that kind of authority? Let's get into what happened next.
3 hours earlier, the morning had started like any other Tuesday in the 43rd floor offices of Apex Stratagem Consulting. Reese Calloway arrived at 7:14 a.m. He always arrived before the rest of the account management team. He'd been doing it for 9 years. He hung his rain-damp coat on the hook behind his cubicle, cubicle 14, farthest from the windows, closest to the humming server room that smelled faintly of burnt dust. His computer took exactly 43 seconds to boot up. He'd counted thousands of times. At 38 years old, Reese had deep lines around his eyes that hadn't been there 5 years ago. His hair had started graying at the temples sometime during year 3 of single parenthood. He kept it neat. He kept everything neat. Control was all he had left. The first email of the day arrived at 7:31 a.m. Mandatory all-hands meeting, conference room, B, 8:45 a.m., attendance required. Reese read it twice. Mandatory all-hands meetings at Apex usually meant one of two things. A new VP wanted to give an inspirational speech about synergy, or someone was getting walked out. He finished his coffee, lukewarm. He'd made it at 6:15 a.m. in the cramped kitchen of the one-bedroom apartment he shared with his 8-year-old daughter, Sophie. Sophie. He glanced at his phone. The hospital's patient portal showed no new updates since last night. Sophie was scheduled for her third round of post-surgery observations at 11 a.m. The cardiac procedure had been successful 6 months ago, but complications kept emerging like unwelcome guests who refused to leave. The medical bills sat in a folder in his backpack, $57,000 and climbing. Apex's health insurance covered 40% of Sophie's condition. 40% of a mountain was still a mountain. Reese had worked 3 freelance projects in the past month just to make the minimum payments. He slept 4 hours a night on good nights. At 7:52 a.m., his direct supervisor, a thin man named Derek Mathers with a perpetual squint and a collection of polyester ties, stopped by his cubicle. "Calloway, those Q3 projections for the Westbrook account, you finished those? They're in your inbox. Sent them last night at 11:47 p.m. Derek's squint intensified. "Last night? I told you I needed them by 5. You told me at 4:30 yesterday afternoon. The analysis alone takes 6 hours. Then you should have worked faster." Reese said nothing. He'd learned years ago that defending himself against Derek's manufactured criticisms was like punching water. The water always won. Derek tapped the cubicle wall twice with his knuckles, a habit he'd picked up from some management podcast that preached physical anchoring as a dominance technique. "Just make sure you're in conference room B at 8:45. Don't be late." He walked away before Reese could respond.
At 8:39 a.m., Reese received a text from the hospital. "Sophie is asking for you. She's scared about the observation. Can you call?" It was from Nurse Patricia, the only staff member who ever bothered to text him directly. Reese stared at the message for 17 seconds. Then he typed back, "I'll call at 8:55, meeting at 8:45. Tell her Daddy loves her." He put the phone in his pocket. The fluorescent lights above his cubicle flickered once, then steadied.
At 8:45 a.m. precisely, Reese walked into Conference Room B. The room was glass on two sides, overlooking the gray downtown skyline. Rain had started falling in thin, persistent sheets. 26 other account managers and coordinators filed in behind him, clutching notebooks and coffee mugs stamped with the Apex logo, a stylized mountain peak that was supposed to represent ascending to excellence. Martin Voss stood at the front of the room. Voss was 47, built like a retired linebacker who'd discovered craft beer, and carried himself with the unearned confidence of a man who'd failed upward his entire career. He'd been regional director for 11 months. In those 11 months, Reese had watched 7 good employees resign, 3 get fired under suspicious circumstances, and 2 leave on stress-related medical leave. The man was a wrecking ball in a tailored suit. "All right, settle down," Voss announced, not because anyone was talking, but because he liked the sound of his own authority. "We've got some changes coming to the account management division. Structural changes, efficiency-focused changes." Reese's phone buzzed in his pocket. Probably the hospital again. He didn't check it. Not yet. "Over the past quarter, we've been conducting performance reviews across all accounts," Voss continued. He paced the front of the room with slow, deliberate steps. "Some of you have exceeded expectations, others have coasted." The word coasted landed in the room like a stone dropped into still water. People exchanged glances. Derek Mathers stood near the door, arms folded, wearing the self-satisfied expression of a man who knew exactly what was about to happen. "Apex Stratagem is entering a new phase. We've secured a major partnership with a European investment consortium. They're bringing fresh capital, fresh expectations, and a mandate for aggressive restructuring." Reese's phone buzzed again. Voss's eyes flicked toward him. "Mr. Calloway, is there somewhere more important you need to be?" "My daughter's in the hospital. I apologize." "Then perhaps you should be there instead of here." A ripple of discomfort moved through the room. Reese didn't flinch. "I'm here because I'm scheduled to be here. Her observation is at 11. "Dedication, admirable." Voss's tone suggested the opposite. "Let's talk about dedication, everyone. Dedication is what built Apex Stratagem. It's what separates the performers from the passengers." He stopped pacing and faced the room directly. "Effective immediately, the Westbrook account is being reassigned. The client has expressed dissatisfaction with recent projections and communication delays." Reese felt the words hit his chest before his brain fully processed them. Westbrook was his account. He'd managed Westbrook Manufacturing's consulting portfolio for 4 years. He'd grown their account from $400,000 annually to $2.3 million. He'd personally trained their in-house strategy team. The client loved him. He'd received a handwritten thank you card from the Westbrook CEO just last Christmas. Communication delays was a lie. Projection dissatisfaction was a lie. Reese knew what was really happening. He'd seen it before. Voss was clearing out anyone who'd been at Apex longer than him. New leadership wanted fresh faces. New faces didn't know when they were being lied to. New faces didn't know when they were being lied to. "The account will now be handled by Derek Mathers and his team," Voss announced. Derek nodded modestly, as if he'd just been awarded a community service plaque. "As for Mr. Calloway's position," Voss turned to face Reese directly, "your role has been deemed redundant under the restructuring initiative. You'll receive a standard severance package, 2 weeks' pay. HR will process your exit by end of day." The room went completely silent. 26 pairs of eyes shifted towards Reese Calloway. He sat perfectly still. His hands rested on the conference table, fingers interlaced, expression unreadable. The rain outside the room had intensified, streaking the glass walls with sheets of gray water. "You're firing me," Reese said. It wasn't a question. "We're restructuring. Terminology matters. I've been here 9 years, and we appreciate your service. The severance package reflects that appreciation." 2 weeks' pay. Reese refused to show emotion. After 9 years, 2 weeks. Voss spread his hands in a gesture of corporate helplessness. "Budget allocations come from the top. My hands are tied." Derek Mathers shifted near the door. He was trying not to smile. His polyester tie had a small coffee stain near the bottom.
Reese's phone buzzed a third time. This time, he checked it. A text from Nurse Patricia. "Sophie's being prepped early. They moved her observation to 9:30. She's asking for you. Please come if you can." Reese looked up from his phone. "I need to leave. My daughter's observation was moved up. She's 8 years old and she's scared." "Then you should absolutely leave," Voss said. "HR can handle your paperwork remotely. I'm not signing anything until I've reviewed it." "That's your right." Voss's expression sharpened. "But let's be clear. The decision is final. The restructuring is happening. The European Consortium is sending their lead representative this afternoon to finalize everything. When he arrives, Apex Stratagem will look very different than it does right now." Something flickered in Reese's eyes. It wasn't anger. It wasn't fear. It was something colder, something that had been sleeping for a very long time. He stood up from the conference table. 9 years, he said quietly. "I gave this company 9 years. I worked weekends. I missed my wife's memorial service because the Bellington account needed emergency revisions. I took calls from this parking garage while Sophie was in surgery." Voss said nothing. "And you're firing me with 2 weeks' pay." "Life isn't fair, Mr. Calloway. The sooner you accept that, the better." Reese looked at him for a long moment. Then he did something no one expected. He smiled. It wasn't a bitter smile, or a sad smile, or a smile of defeat. It was the smile of a man who had just realized he'd been playing a game he could win the entire time. "You're right," Reese said. "Life isn't fair." He walked out of Conference Room B. People parted to let him through. No one met his eyes. No one said goodbye. Derek Mathers watched him pass with the faintest curl of satisfaction on his thin lips. Reese walked down the long corridor toward his cubicle. The gray carpet absorbed his footsteps. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. He didn't go to his desk. He walked past it. He walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows at the far end of the office, overlooking the downtown skyline. Rain lashed against the glass. The city sprawled below, indifferent and enormous. Reese reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a phone. Not his regular phone. That was a battered smartphone with a cracked screen protector and a failing battery. This phone was different. It was sleek, black, and impossibly thin. No visible brand markings, no carrier logo. A single lens on the back surrounded by a ring of what looked like polished obsidian. The screen activated as soon as he picked it up, responding to his fingerprint, his voice, his pattern. The phone had no contacts list, only speed dials, 1 through 5. He pressed 1. The call connected on the first ring. Mr. Kincaid. His voice was different now, lower, calmer, carrying an authority that had been absent for 9 years. Fire every one of them. He ended the call before waiting for a response. He didn't need to wait. When you gave an order to Kincaid, it was as good as done. Reese slid the phone back into his pocket, grabbed his coat from his cubicle hook, and walked toward the elevator bay. The building's main elevators gleamed with brushed steel and ambient lighting. As the elevator doors slid open, he heard footsteps behind him. Martin Voss had followed him out of the conference room. "Calloway," Voss called down the corridor. "Who was that on the phone? Your lawyer? Some employment attorney? Good luck finding one who'll take a case against Apex's legal team." Reese stepped into the elevator. "You think you're going to sue us?" Voss continued, his voice carrying across the office floor. "You think some wrongful termination claim is going to put a dent in this company? We just landed a partnership with one of the most powerful investment consortiums in Europe. Their lead representative is flying in from Zurich as we speak. You know what kind of backing that means? It means your little lawsuit gets buried so deep you'll never see daylight." Reese turned around in the elevator.
He met Martin Voss's eyes through the closing doors. "I'm not suing you," Reese said. The doors closed. Voss stood in the corridor, suddenly uncertain. Something about the way Calloway had said those words, the absolute calm, the almost bored finality, made his stomach tighten. He shook it off. He walked back toward Conference Room B, already composing the email he'd send to HR. Reese Calloway, termination effective immediately, standard severance, no counteroffer, no rehire eligibility. At 1:14 p.m., a black sedan pulled up to the underground entrance of Apex Stratagem's headquarters. The car was a custom-armored Lucid Air with blacked-out windows and diplomatic plates. It moved through the parking structure like a shark through dark water, silent and predatory. 3 men stepped out. The first was an older gentleman in a charcoal suit, silver hair, sharp cheekbones, carrying a leather portfolio that looked like it had been made before the internet existed. His name was Henrik Lang. He was 72 years old and served as chief legal counsel for the Kincaid-Calloway Trust. The second was a young woman in a navy pantsuit with a tablet in her hand and an earpiece discreetly tucked behind her ear. Her name was Amara Chen. She was 29, a graduate of Stanford and Harvard Law, and she'd been managing the trust's operational security for 3 years. The third man was Elias Kincaid. He was 58 years old, built like a cathedral pillar, with close-cropped gray hair and eyes the color of winter steel. He wore a black coat that cost more than most people's cars and moved with the deliberate economy of someone who had spent decades in environments where hesitation meant death. Kincaid had served the Calloway family for 31 years. Before that, he'd served in organizations so classified that even naming them would trigger federal review. He was equal parts chief of staff, security director, and silent executioner of the family's most sensitive directives. He had never failed an assignment. Today would not be the first time. They rode the executive elevator to the 43rd floor. Chen's tablet pinged with real-time data, personnel records, financial forecasts, legal exposure assessments, and a complete operational analysis of Apex Stratagem's last 5 years of business. The trust had been quietly acquiring Apex's debt for 18 months. They owned the company. They'd owned it since March. The European Investment Consortium that Martin Voss had been bragging about was a shell organization Kincaid himself had established. The restructuring initiative Voss had been implementing was a test, a carefully designed stress test to see who in the organization would act with integrity under pressure. Voss had failed. So had Derek Mathers. So had every manager who'd sat silently while a single father of 9 years was terminated for the crime of having a sick child. The elevator doors opened onto the 43rd floor. The receptionist, a young woman named Tessa, who'd been at Apex for 6 months, looked up from her phone. Her expression shifted from professional greeting to alarmed recognition within half a second. "Can I help you?" she managed. "I'm Elias Kincaid, lead representative of the Cassian Consortium. I believe Mr. Voss is expecting me." Tessa's fingers fumbled for her desk phone. Yes, of course. He's been preparing all morning. Let me call him." "Don't call him. Take me to him." Something in his voice made Tessa stand up without questioning. She led the 3 of them down the main corridor, past the cubicle farm where 27 employees watched the procession with widening eyes. Word traveled fast in an open-plan office. "That's the consortium guy, the European money, the one Voss has been talking about for weeks." Martin Voss was in his corner office, feet up on his desk, reviewing the termination paperwork for Reese Calloway. He decided to reduce the severance to 1 week. Why waste the budget? His door opened without a knock. Voss looked up, irritation flaring, and then his feet dropped off the desk with a thud. The 3 people standing in his doorway did not look like typical consultants.
They looked like people who broke things for a living. "Mr. Voss," Kincaid said, "we have a great deal to discuss." Of course." Voss scrambled to his feet, straightening his tie. "I wasn't expecting you until 3. We've got the conference room prepared, presentations loaded, catering ordered." "I'm not here for presentations." "I'm sorry?"
Kincaid stepped into the office. Henrik Lang and Amara Chen followed, fanning out to flank the door. Lang set his leather portfolio on Voss's desk and opened it, revealing documents printed on heavy paper, stamped with seals that Voss didn't recognize. Apex Stratagem Consulting, Kincaid said, was acquired in full by the Cassian Consortium on March 14th of this year. The acquisition was structured through a series of holding companies and debt purchases designed to obscure the true ownership. As of this morning, the final regulatory clearances were filed. The consortium, which I represent, holds 94.7% controlling interest in this company. Voss blinked. I knew about the acquisition. We've been preparing for the restructuring under your direction. The memo you sent said, "The memo I sent was a test." The words landed in the room with the weight of a guillotine blade. "A test?" Voss repeated. "We wanted to see how this company's leadership would behave under the belief that major change was coming. Would you protect your people? Would you act with integrity? Would you prioritize the long-term health of the organization over short-term internal politics?" Kincaid paused. "You failed, spectacularly." Voss's face had gone pale. "I don't understand. I did exactly what the consortium asked. I identified inefficiencies. I streamlined operations. I made the hard decisions that restructuring requires. You terminated Reese Calloway." "Yes, he was an underperforming account manager. His numbers—" "Reese Calloway," Kincaid interrupted, "grew the Westbrook account from $400,000 annually to $2.3 million. He maintained a client retention rate of 100% over 4 years. He personally mentored 17 junior associates, 8 of whom now hold senior positions at firms that Apex considers direct competitors because you couldn't retain them." Voss's mouth opened. Nothing came out. "Those are not the numbers of an underperforming employee. Those are the numbers of the only competent person on this floor." The Westbrook client expressed dissatisfaction. The Westbrook client sent Reese Calloway a handwritten note last December. We've seen it. We've spoken to the client's CEO directly. There was no dissatisfaction. There was no communication delay. You fabricated those claims to justify removing an employee you viewed as a threat to your authority. The silence in the office was absolute. "But that's not why I'm here," Kincaid said. Voss swallowed. "Then why are you here?" Kincaid turned to Amara Chen. She tapped her tablet and a document appeared on the screen, a corporate filing dated 3 days ago, with a name highlighted at the bottom. The name was Calloway. "The Cassian Consortium," Kincaid said, "is a wholly owned subsidiary of the Kincaid-Calloway Trust, a private investment vehicle established 47 years ago by the Calloway family." Voss stared at the tablet. "Reese Calloway," Kincaid said, "is the sole beneficiary of that trust. He owns it. He owns the consortium. He owns this company. He has owned this company since March 14th, when the acquisition was completed."
The words took several seconds to register. When they did, the color drained from Martin Voss's face so completely that he looked like a wax figure. That's not possible," he whispered. "Calloway drives a 12-year-old sedan. He lives in a 1-bedroom apartment in Bridgeton Heights. His wife died 4 years ago and he couldn't even afford a proper memorial. His wife's memorial was held at St. Martin's Cathedral in Zurich. It was attended by 17 heads of state, 3 former prime ministers, and the leadership of every major financial institution in Europe. You weren't invited because you weren't worthy of being in the same room as her memory." Voss's legs gave out. He dropped into his office chair, hands shaking. "Why?" he managed. "Why would someone with that kind of wealth work here as an account manager for 9 years?" Kincaid didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice carried something unusual, something almost like respect. "Because, after his wife died, Reese Calloway made a decision. He wanted his daughter to grow up normal,
No private jets, no mansions, no staff of 200, just a father, a job, and a life that felt real. He chose anonymity. He chose simplicity. He chose to be treated like an ordinary man because he believed ordinary life had something extraordinary couldn't buy. He paused, and this company just fired him for it. At 1:48 p.m., Martin Voss gathered all 43rd floor for an emergency meeting. Word had already spread that something was wrong. The three strangers in the corner office, the closed door, the raised voices that had filtered through the glass walls despite the soundproofing. Now all 43 employees on the floor, account managers, coordinators, analysts, administrative staff, crowded into the main conference space, the same room where hours earlier Reese Calloway had been publicly terminated. Voss stood at the front. His face was ashen. His hands trembled slightly at his sides. Elias Kincaid stood beside him, flanked by Henrik Lang and Amara Chen. "Thank you all for gathering on short notice," Voss began. His voice cracked on the word gathering. There have been developments regarding the restructuring I announced this morning. Significant developments." Derek Mathers stood near the front of the crowd, arms still folded, but his smug expression had been replaced by something uncertain. "The European Consortium it's not exactly what I represented it to be." "Let me clarify," Kincaid said, stepping forward. His voice cut through the room like a blade through fog. "The Cassian Consortium acquired Apex Stratagem 5 months ago. The acquisition was hidden behind multiple holding structures by design, by my design." People exchanged confused glances. Earlier this year, we became aware of significant management failures at this company. Toxic leadership, unethical termination practices, a pattern of removing high-performing employees who challenged authority and replacing them with individuals who prioritized loyalty over competence. Kincaid's eyes moved across the crowd. They settled briefly on Derek Mathers. Derek's arms unfolded. "We decided to test the organization," Kincaid continued. "We announced a restructuring initiative. We observed how leadership responded. We watched who they protected and who they sacrificed." He paused. "This morning, Martin Voss terminated Reese Calloway, a 9-year employee, a single father of an 8-year-old girl recovering from heart surgery, with a fabricated performance justification and a severance package of 2 weeks' pay." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Several people looked at the floor. What Mr. Voss did not know, and what none of you knew, is that Reese Calloway is not an ordinary account manager. The murmuring stopped. Reese Calloway is the sole beneficiary of the Kincaid-Calloway Trust. He is the owner of the Cassian Consortium, which means, Kincaid let the silence stretch for exactly 3 seconds, he is the owner of this company. He has been your employer for the past 5 months.
The room erupted. Voices overlapped, exclamations of shock, disbelief. Questions shouted from different corners of the room. "That's impossible," someone yelled. "Calloway? No way. He drove a Corolla. I borrowed $20 from him last month." Kincaid raised his hand. The room went silent instantly, as if someone had flipped a switch. "This morning, Mr. Calloway gave me a single instruction. His exact words were, 'Fire every one of them.'" The silence that followed was suffocating. 43 people stopped breathing. However, Mr. Calloway is not a vindictive man. Before his departure, I received a follow-up communication from him. He has given me specific criteria for who stays and who goes. He turned to Amara Chen. She stepped forward with her tablet. "The following individuals are terminated effective immediately," she announced. "Martin Voss, Derek Mathers, Paul Emmerich, Cynthia Kwan, Jordan Haskett, Roberta Fuentes." 6 names, 6 people. Derek Mathers' face went through 3 distinct expressions in 2 seconds: shock,
outrage, and then a sickening realization of what this meant. "I can't be fired," Derek sputtered. "I just got promoted. The Westbrook account." "The Westbrook account belongs to no one in this room," Kincaid said. "It belongs to Reese Calloway. He built it. He maintained it. And if the client learns what happened here today, which they will almost certainly follow him wherever he goes." Martin Voss hadn't moved. He stood frozen at the front of the room, a statue of a man who had just watched his entire career detonate. "The rest of you," Kincaid said, addressing the remaining employees, "are being placed under review, not for performance, not for numbers, for character." He walked slowly through the crowd, making eye contact with individual employees. "Reese Calloway worked beside you for 9 years. He covered shifts when people were sick. He stayed late to help junior associates with presentations. He never complained. He never demanded recognition. He never once mentioned who he really was." Kincaid stopped walking. "This morning, when he was publicly humiliated and fired, not a single person in this room spoke up. Not one of you said, 'Wait, that's not right.' Not one of you said, 'I've worked with him. He doesn't deserve this.'" The silence was devastating. "You will have an opportunity to earn your positions back, but that opportunity will depend entirely on what you do next. Some of you will step up. Some of you will not. The trust will be watching." He turned back toward the front of the room. "Mr. Voss, Mr. Mathers, and the other terminated individuals, you have 30 minutes to collect your belongings. Security will escort you out." Derek Mathers took a step forward. "This is insane. I have a mortgage. I have—" "You should have thought about that before you helped fabricate a performance case against a man whose daughter was in the hospital," Kincaid said without turning around. Derek's mouth closed. Martin Voss finally spoke. His voice was barely above a whisper. "Where is he?" Kincaid glanced back. "Mr. Calloway is at the hospital with his daughter, where he should have been this morning, where he wanted to be, where you prevented him from being." Reese Calloway sat in a plastic chair beside Sophie's hospital bed. The observation had gone well. No complications. The cardiologist, Dr. Ewan, a calm woman with steady hands and kind eyes, had told him Sophie was showing encouraging progress. The lingering post-surgical concerns might resolve on their own. "She's a fighter, your daughter," Dr. Ewan had said. "She gets it from her mother," Reese had replied. Sophie was sleeping now. The afternoon light filtered through the hospital window, soft and golden. Machines beeped quietly. A stuffed elephant, Mr. Wrinkles, Sophie's companion through 3 surgeries and countless hospital stays, sat propped against her pillow. Reese held his daughter's small hand. His phone buzzed.
The sleek black one. A text from Kincaid. "It's done. 6 terminated. Voss and Mathers included. The rest under review. The company is waiting for your direction." Reese read the message twice. 9 years. He'd spent 9 years hiding, 9 years pretending to be ordinary, 9 years working for people who viewed him as disposable, replaceable, a number on a spreadsheet. And he'd been okay with that, because the alternative, the life of trust funds and private jets, and never knowing whether people liked him for himself or for his bank account, had seemed worse. But something had changed this morning. When Martin Voss had looked him in the eye and said, "Life isn't fair, Mr. Calloway," something had cracked open inside him. He'd spent years protecting Sophie from the weight of the Calloway legacy, but what was the point of having power if you never used it to protect the people you loved? Sophie stirred in her sleep. Her fingers tightened around his. Reese made a decision. He typed a response to Kincaid. "Restructure the company. No more corner offices. No more power trips. Build something that actually helps people. I'll send my vision document tonight." He paused, then added, "And make sure everyone knows why this happened. Not for revenge, for accountability." Kincaid's response came seconds later. "Understood. Take care of Sophie." Reese put the phone away. He looked at his daughter's sleeping face, at the steady rise and fall of her chest, at the medical equipment that cost more per day than most people earned in a month. The bills still sat in his backpack, $57,000. He hadn't paid them yet, not from the trust. He'd been paying them himself, working freelance jobs, scraping together payments, because he'd wanted to prove he could do it on his own. But watching Sophie sleep, he realized something. There was no virtue in struggling alone when you didn't have to. There was no honor in letting pride get in the way of your daughter's recovery. He pulled out his regular phone and opened the hospital's payment portal. He selected Pay in Full and entered the routing number for the account Kincaid had set up years ago, an account he'd never touched until now. He pressed Submit. The screen displayed a confirmation message. Payment received. Balance $0.00. $57,000, gone in a single click. Reese felt something loosen in his chest, something he'd been carrying for 4 years. He leaned back in the plastic chair and closed his eyes. 3 days later, Reese Calloway returned to Apex Stratagem's headquarters. He didn't come as an account manager. He came as the owner. The building's lobby looked the same: polished marble, abstract art installations, the faint scent of expensive air freshener. But the security guard at the front desk recognized him differently now. "Mr. Calloway," the guard said, straightening. "Welcome back, sir." "Thank you, Marcus. How's your son's baseball season going?" Marcus blinked, stunned that Reese remembered. He made the all-star team, actually." "Good. Tell him I said congratulations." Reese walked toward the executive elevator. The 43rd floor had changed in 3 days. The glass-walled corner office that had belonged to Martin Voss was empty now. The furniture had been removed. The walls had been repainted. A sign on the door read, "Under renovation."
The cubicle farm had been rearranged. Fewer walls, more open space. Collaborative workstations instead of isolation chambers. And in the center of the floor, where Conference Room B used to be, there was now a large open meeting area with comfortable chairs and natural light. People noticed Reese the moment he stepped off the elevator. Conversations stopped. Keyboards went silent. 43 employees, the ones who remained, turned to look at the man they'd known for 9 years as the quiet single dad in Cubicle 14. Reese didn't walk to a corner office. He walked to the open meeting area in the center of the floor. "Can I have everyone's attention?" People gathered, quickly, quietly. Reese looked at them, people he'd worked beside for nearly a decade. He knew their names. He knew their spouses' names. He knew who had kids and who had aging parents and who was struggling with things nobody talked about. 3 days ago, he said, I was fired from this company. Some of you watched it happen. Some of you didn't. It doesn't matter now. He paused. What matters is what happens next. He began walking slowly through the crowd, making eye contact with individuals, the same way Kincaid had done 3 days earlier. I didn't buy this company to get revenge. I bought it because I saw something worth saving. When I started here 9 years ago, Apex wasn't perfect, but it was fair. Hard work was recognized. Talent was nurtured. People looked out for each other. He stopped beside a woman named Sandra Okonkwo, who had been an analyst for 6 years and once stayed until midnight helping Reese finish a presentation that wasn't even her responsibility. Some of you still embody those values, Reese said. I know who you are. I've been watching for 9 years. I've seen who stays late to help. I've seen who shares credit. I've seen who treats the janitors and the interns with the same respect they give the executives. He moved on. Some of you haven't. Some of you stayed silent when you knew what was happening was wrong. Some of you participated. Some of you just looked the other way. The silence in the room was heavy. Here's what's going to happen. The people who were directly involved in unethical terminations, they're already gone. You know who they are. The rest of you are getting a second chance, but it comes with conditions. He turned to face the entire group. No more corner offices. No more hierarchy for hierarchy's sake. Leadership positions will be earned through demonstrated integrity, not office politics. Every termination will require documented cause and third-party review. Every promotion will require peer input. And the health insurance plan, he paused, is being upgraded to 100% of major medical expenses. No caps, no exclusions for pre-existing conditions. Several people gasped. The health insurance upgrade alone would change lives. I know what it's like to sit in a hospital room and wonder how you're going to pay for your child's surgery, Reese said quietly. No one who works for this company should ever have to feel that. Sandra Okonkwo had tears in her eyes. If you can work in a company built on those principles, Reese said, then I want you here. If you can't, if you're looking for a place where you can climb by stepping on other people, there's the door. He pointed toward the elevator. No one moved. Good, Reese said. Then let's get to work.
1 month later, the transformation of Apex Stratagem had become industry news. Business journals ran headlines about the quiet revolution at a mid-tier consulting firm that had suddenly implemented the most progressive workplace policies in the sector. Employee satisfaction scores had skyrocketed. 3 former employees who'd been wrongfully terminated under the Voss regime had been contacted, offered generous settlements, and, in 2 cases, invited to return. The Westbrook account had stayed with Apex. The client's CEO, a pragmatic woman named Evelyn Westbrook, had called Reese personally to discuss the situation. I knew something was wrong when they took you off the account, she'd said. I just didn't know how wrong. You'll have our business as long as you want it. Martin Voss had not found new employment. His termination had been reported to the state's labor board with full documentation of his unethical practices. He was under investigation for multiple violations. No reputable firm would touch him. He'd sent Reese an email, a rambling, desperate message that alternated between apologizing and blaming that Reese had read once and deleted without responding. Derek Mathers had fared no better. His reputation had preceded him. The polyester tie industry had lost a loyal customer. On a Saturday afternoon, Reese Calloway sat on a bench in Bridgeton Heights Park. Sophie was on the playground, climbing a jungle gym with the fierce determination of an 8-year-old who had spent too much time in hospital beds. Her recovery was progressing. Dr. Yuen had used the word remarkable at the last appointment. Mr. Wrinkles the elephant sat on the bench beside Reese, serving as Sophie's designated lookout. Kincaid approached from the walking path. "Mind if I sit?" he asked. "Go ahead." Kincaid settled onto the bench, his imposing frame somehow not feeling out of place next to a stuffed elephant and a tired father watching his daughter play. "The Trust's quarterly report is in," Kincaid said. "The consortium is up 12%. Apex is no longer bleeding talent. And the nonprofit you established, the Sophie Calloway Pediatric Cardiac Foundation, received its first major donation this morning, $2 million. Anonymous." Reese nodded. "Good. You could put your name on it. You should. It's your money, your idea, your daughter's name." "The foundation isn't about me." Reese watched Sophie slide down a bright yellow slide, arms raised like she was flying. "It's about making sure other parents don't have to choose between bankruptcy and their child's life." Kincaid was silent for a moment. "You know," he said finally, "your father would have been proud." Reese's jaw tightened slightly. "He built the trust so you could do exactly this: protect people, build things, use power wisely." "I know." "Do you regret it? The 9 years, the apartment, the anonymity?" Reese watched Sophie run toward the swings, her laugh carried across the playground, bright and uncomplicated. "No," he said. "Those 9 years taught me things I never would have learned in a boardroom. How people treat someone they think has no power, who's kind when no one's watching, who speaks up when it costs them something." He turned to Kincaid. "I'm not going back to who I was before, but I'm not staying who I was during those 9 years either. There's a middle ground. I'm going to find it." Kincaid nodded slowly. "And Apex?" "Apex was step 1. There are thousands of companies just like it. Toxic leadership, exploited workers, people who think they can treat others however they want because they've got the title in the corner office." Reese's voice hardened slightly. "They're going to learn, one by one." Kincaid allowed himself a rare smile. "I'll start preparing the acquisition list." "Do that." Kincaid stood, straightened his coat, and walked back toward the park entrance. Reese remained on the bench.
Sophie ran up to him, breathless and grinning. "Daddy, I went down the big slide 5 times. Did you see?" "I saw every single one, sweetheart." "Who was that man you were talking to?" "An old friend." Reese scooped her up, Mr. Wrinkles and all. "He helps me take care of things." "Like a superhero?" "Something like that." He carried his daughter toward the car, not the 12-year-old sedan anymore, but a modest SUV that was safe and reliable, and didn't draw attention, because Reese Calloway still understood something that Martin Voss never had. True power didn't need to announce itself. True power just waited, and when the moment came, it didn't shout, it made one phone call. If you enjoyed this lesson, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Share this video with someone who needs to see what real karma looks like. I'll see you in the next one.